Don't forget, ko-fi.com/stopwritingalone is a real simple way to show your support for what's going on here week after week. Hi everyone, this is Nicole Rivera and you're listening to the Stop Writing Alone podcast for writers who are looking for their writing community. I know you want to find readers for your work, but I think your first step is to connect with other writers. That's what we're going to do here in the Stop Writing Alone podcast. We'll do writing prompts and other writing group activities, discover online writing communities, learn how to find local writing groups, or how to make your own. Join us as we explore, learn, and write. Hi, this is Nicole Rivera, and you're listening to the Stop Writing Alone podcast. Hey, everybody, this week I have the pleasure of sharing with you Jenna Britton. Do you know Jenna already? It's very possible. If not, I am so excited to introduce her to you. She is the host of the Brave Enough to Be podcast, and she has a Sunday newsletter that I think everybody would enjoy subscribing to. So I'm going to hop right in here so that she can introduce herself to you and you can get to know Jenna a little bit better today. Ladies and gentlemen, I am here today with the wonderful Jenna Britton. And Jenna and I have met through our own personal, we're in a book club that I've talked to you guys about so often. But Jenna has a whole history of story and she's done so many wonderful things. In fact, Jenna, I would just like to say thank you for coming. Welcome to Stop Writing Alone, not only on the podcast, but we know that you listen as well. Yeah. Can you introduce yourself to the listeners that maybe do not know who Jenna Britton is just yet?
Sure. So, well, first of all, thank you for having me. I'm super excited to be here. And I got to say that the book club that we are in together, I only know about because I listened to Stop Writing Alone. So it's been a really cool full circle sort of connection and has really enhanced my life over the last, 6 months or whatever it's been.
It was so surprising to me when you told me, when I saw it, when I read that you were like, oh, I found out from Stop Writing Alone. I'm like, wait, that's how Jenna got here? That's amazing. So
Yes.
yeah,
And
totally
I was trying
full
to,
circle.
I was trying to remember this morning, like, how did I find Stop Writing Alone? It must have been through Don't Keep Your Day Job. But,
Right.
I must have just seen a link or something. And I was like, oh, I like that. Like, I need
Right.
that in my life. And I remember listening to your episode with Sam on the 4th of July. I was like getting ready to go to a barbecue. And you were talking about Medium because I was super interested in that. And then she mentioned the book club. And I think it had been out for a little while, and I was like, oh my God, I have to sign up. I have to get like one of the slots. And so it's been amazing. I'm so glad I found your community and then found the book club. It's been great. But about me. So yeah, I have been, even though I haven't always called myself this, I would say that I've been a writer since I knew how to write. Maybe even before then. Like when I was little, I would tell my mom and my grandma stories and like make them write them down and like hole punch them and like tie them together with yarn. So I had little books. And I think, I don't know if every writer goes through this. Maybe it was just something that I struggled with, but I definitely had a period of life around like high school, college age where I sort of learned the message that like, oh, this isn't a real career. Like start thinking about things that you could actually do. And so I started looking for these ways that I could turn writing into a real thing. And I'm using air quotes here. And so I thought about teaching, and that didn't end up being the right path for me. And I eventually ended up in public relations and marketing, which I now think of as like a shadow career, a really good shadow career for writers. And it's been great in its own ways. It's taught me a lot. But the last few years, I've really spent trying to come back to and tap back into the writer that was in me, like as a little girl, the one who just was excited about being creative, about making stuff up, about telling the story of her life, about sharing her stuff. Like when I think about how willing I was to just be like, hey, read my poem, listen to my story. And now I like freak out about publishing something on Medium. And I'm just like, just trying to like chip away at all of those things that I have somehow learned, whether explicitly or implicitly over the years, and get back to the writer that I know is within me. So yeah, I do that through, like I said, writing on Medium sometimes. I have a weekly newsletter that I send out. Um, and I'm just kind of exploring the different ways that I can be more creative in my daily life.
I love that you said, like, yeah, I'm also curious. Does everybody have that path of that lesson that we
Mm-hmm.
get somewhere along the line? Because I heard it too. You
Yeah.
know, this is not a thing that's a career on
Yeah.
any level. And to be in this space now, and maybe it's the internet that makes things clear. It's so vividly clear how this could have always been the career if
Mm-hmm.
that's just where the energies were poured.
Totally.
And it's like, so it's frustrating, you know, but of
Yep.
course it's also empowering in this moment, because it's like, well, then I can make it happen
Yeah.
now, you know.
Totally. Totally.
So
Yeah, and it's tough because I, like you, get frustrated where I'm like, this could have been the path. Like I'm like 15 years off track now.
exactly.
But at the same time, I mean, I know that you were a teacher. My
Mhm.
background, there's a lot of it that really helps me be the writer I am now. And so sometimes I just remind myself, like, okay, you have a decade's worth of marketing experience now. Like, put that to work for the writer that you want to be.
Absolutely.
And I see how you incorporate your skills as a teacher, as a community leader in your work now. So it's like it all comes together. It's all, it all, not to be too woo woo, but like happens the way that it's supposed to. But
Absolutely. Yeah.
yeah,
Agreed. I feel no regrets, and I loved passionately what I was doing. So
yeah,
I fell into this whole other thing that I
yeah,
loved. And like you said, it does feed all of that. It feeds everything that I am now. But
yeah.
I want to take a moment and talk about your newsletter that you said
Hmm.
almost in passing there. And I want to just tell you, because I don't know if I've told you this. I'm in the circles of all people saying, "Oh, you have to get an email newsletter, and here's why it's important," and all the things that we need to be doing. And I've heard lots of people say, uh, "Oh, my email is the one that everybody reads. Here's how I
Mm.
get them." Jenna, you are the one newsletter that I will consistently open every
Mm.
single. I say, "Here's Jenna's email. Thank you." And because
Oh
my
wow.
email is bananas right now, as you
Sure.
can imagine.
Yeah.
I'm sure I'm not alone, but you look at it and you're like, "Okay, what do I really have to read here?" I love that you do it weekly. I love
Yeah.
that we know that it's your Sunday sort of musings, and for me, it's like a Monday morning tradition.
Yeah.
I wake up Monday and I'm like, okay, where's Jenna's newsletter? And it's
Mhm.
wonderful because it's a newsletter, but it's a kind of like a personal essay, and then now that you also have, which we need to discuss, your podcast, then we get a little snippet about what happened in the previous week. But
Yeah.
how did you come to say, because you've done so much writing all over the place? I love um, that you're out there.
Mm.
Just so the audience knows, some of the places that Jenna's written is Salon, Thought Catalog, Career Contessa, Darling Magazine, the music. I mean, you have a nice long list there. But
Yeah.
at some point last year, you said, "I want to have a newsletter
Yeah.
and show up weekly." So, what was that decision, and why there? You know,
Yeah. Yeah, thank you for that question. And thank you for all of that. That's so kind. Like and I know from having so many creative projects of your own that sometimes like I'll listen to your podcast and I love it and I don't necessarily like reach out and tell you how much I loved it or how much something
right.
resonated with me, but so I really appreciate you sharing that with me. Thank you. Um so a lot of the things that you mentioned, a lot of the places that I have been published were several years ago. It was
Okay.
anywhere from like 4 to 7 years ago. And I got into this place for a while where I was taking writing classes, and that was really good accountability for me to like show up and create something and then have a teacher be like, go submit that. Um,
Oh, okay,
and
great.
yeah, and I don't know if you know Gretchen Rubin's Four Tendencies, but
Oh yeah.
yeah, I'm an obliger. So I'm like,
Me
okay,
too.
if someone else tells me to do it, I'm on it. So that worked really well for a while. And then I a couple of years ago, was it 2 years ago, 3 years ago? I don't even know. I went through a divorce, and I
Okay.
moved from Los Angeles to Oregon, and I got into a new relationship that was really unhealthy. Like, I did the thing you're not supposed to do, where, you're
Mm,
like not taking time to heal, and all of this stuff was happening. And I was still a freelancer at the time. I was doing freelance copywriting, and making money was a struggle, and I was worried about paying rent and eating food. And it was like one of those places where if you don't have your bare necessities met, you can hardly show up in the rest of your life.
yeah.
And
Yeah.
so during that time period, a time period where honestly I probably should have been writing, not publishing, but like at least journaling a lot more.
Processing
Yeah,
through word. Yeah.
exactly. I wasn't doing any of it. And I
Yeah.
just kind of like paused on everything. And part of it was I was so ashamed of like what was happening in my life. Like, if you look back at that time period on social media, I didn't post for a year. Like, I just went
Dark.
inside, went
Yeah.
dark.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so last year, at the beginning of last year, I had gotten out of that unhealthy relationship. I had gotten a full-time job that certainly wasn't a dream job, but it like gave me structure and stability. I had started to heal from a lot of stuff. I felt grounded now in Portland. I had started to make a group of friends. I was finally healing, and like not
Right.
in the eye of the storm anymore. And I got to this point where I was like, it always comes back to me. Like, writing is like a siren song where it's just like, hey, don't forget about me. Like,
Yeah.
I know you had to take a break, but like, let's come back to it. And so I was like, I, like you, had heard over and over again, like, have a newsletter, have a newsletter. And I was just very not against it, but more like, I don't want to, what am I going to sell? I don't have
I
anything
have
to
nothing to
sell.
sell. Right.
Yeah. And so, and like that's the only way you can have a newsletter.
Exactly.
And so finally, I had this list. had MailChimp. I had like 8 people on it, including my mom and several friends. And I was like, you know what? I'm just going to send a personal essay once a week, same day, every week, to this newsletter list. At the time, I was like, I'm not even going to try to grow the list. I'm not going to market it. I'm not going to do anything. It literally was an accountability measure for me of like,
Okay.
show up, you commit to this thing and show up and do it every Sunday. And yeah, there were definitely some times in the beginning where I like maybe tried to get out of it a little bit, where I was like, who's
Who's
reading it?
reading?
Yeah,
Who's reading?
exactly.
Right.
Exactly. And but I don't, that was almost more helpful, because if I was like, oh, only 5 people are reading it, it gave me a little bit of a like buffer of safety
Mm-hmm.
to start putting stuff out there on a consistent basis. And then by the time it started growing a little bit, and mind you, like, it still hasn't even grown that much. It's still by any measure of like online business,
Right.
email, newsletter list, it's very, very small. But it like, I got more and more comfortable sharing things. And now I'm like committed. Like, there have been Sundays where I was not, I mean, most times, most weeks, I do not write it ahead of time. I write it on Sunday, but there have been Sundays where I was like jet lagged or
Yeah.
sick or whatever. And Jordan, my boyfriend, will be like, you don't have to write it today. Or you can like send out an email and say, hey, I'm not feeling well, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, no,
Right. Right. Right.
I'm sending it
That's
out. And
important.
yeah, and I'm sure there will be a Sunday where like
Of course.
it doesn't work. Like, that's life.
Yeah.
But it has been so huge for me, because once I started doing that, it felt like this creative domino where
Right.
all of a sudden I was like, oh, and I want to do this and I want to try that.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like my favorite thing that I do now. And
Yeah.
to hear you say what you shared with me, to have, a couple people a week write back and say, oh, this really resonated with me, or you reminded me of like all the things that we love about story,
Right.
it fills me up. Like,
Yeah.
I can ride that high all week,
Absolutely.
and
Absolutely.
it's the best.
It's fantastic. I mean, and I love that you came at this, like you said, with nothing to sell, because I think everyone hears that email newsletter and
Mm,
thinks it's not for me yet, and it
yeah.
could be exactly that outlet. It's
Yeah.
it's a beautiful thing. To me, there's something I started blogging when I first came out of teaching, and it was very similar. I was laughing when you were saying like, well, no one's reading, so that's safe.
Yeah.
Because that's how I started. I was like, well, I'll just put anything out there because, and you're right. There's a comfort in that it doesn't
Mhm.
matter. No one's going to see this. And so there's so many parallels to me right now with newsletters, email newsletters, and what blogging used to be. It
Yeah.
could be like a personal blog that you share
Yeah.
with just the people that want to subscribe and see. But you just share so much wonderful stuff there, and your whole story, your I feel like I talk to a lot of people that are interested in writing fiction and story and things of that nature, and there is such power in our own personal story, and
Mm.
you are committed to that. Why is that? What is your draw to the personal essay versus, I mean, not that I'm saying that you wouldn't ever write anything else, but
Sure.
I love personal essay when it's
Yeah.
done really well. Actually, I did talk to the ladies at Writing Class Radio, who that's
Yes.
their whole thing, and they're amazing.
I know. I loved that episode, and I
Oh
love
man,
them.
and their podcast is really good for that stuff
Mhm.
too. So how did you fall into personal essay
Yeah.
and feeling that power of story? I think it's one of those things that people get as they get older. They say, "Wait, you know
Mhm.
what? My story is valuable also." And I
Yeah.
feel like you came to it at a much younger age. So I'm wondering if you can trace back
Yeah.
that, especially since you were writing stories for your mom and grandma back in the day. I'm sure they weren't like, I had popcorn today. It was more
Yeah.
of a story. So what made the
Yeah.
shift to
Mm.
personal essay for you?
Oh, that's such a good question, Nicole. And I still am trying to figure this one out, but
Mm,
I think so. I've also always really loved like personal development and personal growth. And I think
yeah.
sometimes to a fault, you know. And I know like we're in the same book club mastermind
Yes.
together. Like I know you're one of my people when it comes to this. And probably a lot of your listeners are too. But it's funny because I was talking to someone yesterday who also writes personal essay, and she referred to it as therapy by yourself. And I
Oh,
was like,
I love
yeah,
that.
yeah. Like it's like processing on the page, right?
Yes.
Um and there you have to be careful, and I have to be careful with this because sometimes for that reason personal essay can veer into like a diary entry or
Yes.
being very like navel gazy, and that's fine. I totally advocate for that kind of journaling,
Right.
private journaling as well. And so it's always about like, okay, yes, here's my personal experience, but what's the universal lesson here? What's the thing that like I can offer other people, or that someone else can maybe read it and be like, yeah, I feel connected to that too.
Yeah.
And going back to your question, I think one of the reasons I feel so drawn to it as a writer is because I'm drawn to it as a reader, because
Yeah.
it is personal essays and it is memoir that like has guided me
Mm,
through time, like hard times in my life and good times in my life, you
yeah.
know. But I remember reading at like before I separated from my ex-husband, I remember rereading Eat, Pray, Love.
Okay. Yeah.
And I know everyone, you know, has their own feelings about that book, which I love it and I love Elizabeth Gilbert. So
Yeah.
just so you
She's
know which side I'm
amazing.
on. Yeah. But you know, when she's writing about sitting on her bathroom floor and not knowing what to do, and
Mhm.
not and then just being in the situation where like eh, at least from my understanding of the story, like she knows she wants to leave but she doesn't feel like she can leave. And it's
Right.
just like I remember reading that and being like, yeah, exactly. And in the book she
Mm,
talks about just calling out to, you know, God, the universe, whoever, and being like, tell me what to do, like
yeah.
just show me what to do. And I did the same thing.
Yeah.
And it's like story, whether it's fiction or nonfiction, what I love about it and what so many writers love about it is that it makes us feel less alone.
Yeah.
You know, like we read about other people's experiences, whether they're real or not, and we're like, oh, you get it. Like it's not just me.
Yeah.
And personal essay and memoir has always done that for me. And so I've always been drawn to give it back as well, to share it back. And I think part of it is maybe a little, I hate to admit this, but like maybe a little narcissistic. Like maybe a little
I
bit like
I I will
Yeah.
challenge that and say, I don't think it's narcissistic. I think you have identified the story that you
Yeah.
have to share. And
Yeah.
I think there's a line, definitely, where you could tip into narcissism. But I think
Mm.
there's also that that probably comes from reading so much personal essay and memoir and everything that you say, oh, there's stuff in here too
Yeah.
that's valuable to a reader like me. Yeah, so I don't think it's narcissistic, I should say, yet, right? Because it could
Yes,
explode into that, but I
totally.
think anybody that writes about themselves, we're always in danger of crossing that
Yeah.
line.
Yeah.
But there is a very valuable space long before that
Mm,
that
mhm.
serves everything that you're just saying here. Just that
Yeah.
that whole idea of all of us not feeling alone in all of these hard times, good times, all the
Yeah.
feelings, like it's
Yeah.
just the human experience, which is kind of like a really great segue to a discussion about what you're doing now with the podcast, which I feel is expanding that and saying, I have my story, but I've found all these other people
Yeah.
that have these great stories. So talk to us a little bit about Brave Enough to Be.
Yeah. So I remember how I said with the newsletter, like once I started writing that every week, it was like a creative domino. And I
Yeah.
was just like, what else can I do? So that was March of last year that I started it. And I should go back and say that I love podcasts. Like I
Yeah.
would listen to them every day, like all day, every day of my life if I could. And so I think I had this inkling in my mind for a while of like, oh, it would be really cool to have one. Like, what a cool thing to just get to talk to people that are interesting to you and that you admire and like
Mhm.
learn from them on a regular basis. And so in what was it? April, I think, of last year, there was a project. It happens every year. It's called the 100-Day Project, and it's basically just a community of people on the
Oh, yes.
internet. Yeah, I love internet communities. Like
Me
they're the
too. And that
best.
Andy J. Pizza does a lot with the
Oh
100-Day Project,
yeah,
right? I don't
yes,
He doesn't run it, but I feel like he talked a lot
yeah,
about it in his podcast.
totally, yes.
Okay.
It's very good for. I mean, it's good for anyone, but it's a very good like artistic thing.
Right.
Similar to like the 30-day challenges that you have done and shared on Instagram. It's a very similar concept of just like you create or you pick one thing that you want to do every day, one creative thing you want to do every day for
Right.
100 days. And people create artwork, they crochet things, they write things. And I had tried to do it a couple of different times in the past and never really got past like day 22, if that. um, and this year, or last year rather, I decided I'm not going to write something this year. Like I'm doing the newsletter, I'm good with that. I'm going to make a mini podcast episode every day.
Oh.
And I was like, this will be good practice because A, it's practice. It's like the literal definition of practice. B, once again, nobody's listening. And,
Yeah.
so it's super safe.
Right.
We're
I love
lucky
it.
because like you can create, I did it on my phone,
Yeah.
like I recorded on my phone and popped it up on SoundCloud and called it a day. And,
So it's out
um,
there.
oh yeah, it's
Oh, I
out
love it.
there. Yeah, and in the beginning they were very not formal, but like, I would script out exactly what I wanted to say and talk
Yeah.
about, and probably about like 25, 30 days in, it's just like, "Hey guys, so today,
Right.
like I'm just
This is like you sound like my first 2 months.
yeah,
It's
exactly, of
like that's great.
podcasting.
You got it out of your system. I love it. In
Yep.
100 days. This is very smart,
Yeah.
Jenna.
Yes, and it's so good because like if you have perfectionist tendencies, if you
Mhm.
are afraid, yeah, like you don't have a choice but to get over it,
Yeah,
because you still
right.
got to show up
You
every
gotta
day.
show
You don't
up.
have time to like edit things and make them so much better. You don't have time to overthink what you're going to talk about. And some of those podcast episodes, probably a lot of them, are not good. Like
Right.
they're not. But
Right.
it was just a practice for me of like showing up for a thing that I committed to and doing it every day anyway,
Yep.
which was so huge. It was such good practice. And I knew without a shadow of a doubt after I finished those 100 days, I was like, yeah, I want a podcast.
Amazing.
Of course, I then waited like 6 more months to do anything about it. I was like,
Just
well, I got
before you continue on the podcast,
yeah.
would you say that this was your first endeavor into imperfection? Like, what is,
Oh, good question.
have you
Uh,
been comfortable with that before, or did this sort of force your hand in a way that you just
mm,
never did before?
it totally forced my hand. I'm
Mm,
still not comfortable with it. Like I
right.
struggle, and like yeah, great question. It forced my hand in a big way. It
Mm.
forced me to, I mean, and there was other uncomfortable stuff that I had to deal with too, right? Like the ex that unhealthy relationship that I got into after my marriage ended, like there was some time in the middle of the project where like it was clear that he was like listening to
Oh,
them and reaching
gosh.
out, and it was
Yeah.
just like some weird gross stuff. And it
Yeah.
for me it was also a practice in like, wow, when you put your stuff out there, like
Anyone.
anyone, yeah, has access to it. And like that's the good thing and can be a bad thing
Right.
sometimes. And
Right.
I just had to get comfortable with like, am I going to stand behind this project? Am I going to let him keep me from doing the thing that I want to do because now I
Oh,
feel
how powerful.
uncomfortable?
I'm getting
Yeah.
chills. Ugh.
Yeah. And so it was such, and I've even thought that with the current podcast, with Brave Enough to Be, where there are some times where I'm like, am I okay with like him hearing that? I mean, I don't even like
Right.
to think about him that much, but like sometimes it's like, am I cool with my mom hearing this? Like, if,
Yeah.
it's just, and I think about that with the newsletter too. And it's this, sometimes I'm not comfortable and I'll back off, but other
Right.
times I do try to push the edge a little bit of,
Yeah, I was just going to say that's
yeah.
something that comes up for so many people who endeavor to write personal essay or memoir. It's
Mm-hmm.
that I do need to and want to write this, but I
Mm-hmm.
have some people that I don't want to read it, and how do
Totally.
you deal with that?
Totally.
But
And
you're right, you make that decision on a case by case basis. Sometimes you pull
exactly.
back, and sometimes you're brave enough to be.
Yes. Oh, look at you. I love it. Yeah, and I've done it the right way and I've done it the wrong way. Like I wrote about my grandmother passing away a week or two ago in the newsletter, and I reached out to my mom ahead of time because that was very much a huge story for her too. And I
Yeah,
didn't want the email to just pop up in her inbox and be like, "Hey, remember this traumatic thing that happened to you?"
yeah,
And so I reached out. It wasn't like about my mom or anything negative about her, but I had the foresight and the practice of not doing it right in the past to be like, "Hey, I'm writing about this. Is it okay
it's
with
coming.
you?
Yeah.
It's coming." Exactly. And so she was like, "Yeah, of course." And then followed up with like, "Thank you for asking." So it just reminded me
Mm,
of like, yeah, yes,
it's
it's
a
my
simple act.
story.
Yeah.
Exactly. But I've gotta be conscious of like who else is hearing things. And so yeah, it's a practice, but it totally forced my hand at doing things imperfectly. And I'm
Yeah.
still working on it, but
I
it
think
was
we all
helpful.
are. But
Mm-hmm.
when you have something, this is part of why I always love these challenges because they do. I also, as a fellow obliger, it's like once you sign up, it's like, oh, now you have to do it for the people of
Yes,
the challenge. So, all right,
exactly.
now I'm stuck. I have to do it. And then you're
Yep.
pushed into directions that, you know, you would be kind to yourself and say, "Nah, I don't need to do that today."
Oh, yeah.
So it's really great. So okay, so you do a 100-day challenge. I love
Hmm.
that.
Yeah.
I'm so loving all things about that, by the way.
Yes.
And now you're
Yeah.
convinced you're going to have a podcast. Time passes as it
Yes.
does.
Oh my gosh. Wait, Nicole, I have to tell you this, and like embarrassing, and I'm still annoyed with myself for it. But I also then signed up for like a podcast class
Mm,
because I was like, okay, I'm serious. And my way of doing that is always like spend money on an online
right.
course that you won't finish. Um, and so I signed up for this podcast class, which was great. And part of it is all you have to do is record one episode and submit it by a certain date. And then the woman who runs it has her own podcast with a pretty, like she's been doing it for years. So she has a
Okay.
pretty good following. And like, if you win, she will play your podcast episode on her podcast. So it like
Cool.
automatically brings in, and so the
Listeners.
deadline, yeah, and the deadline was August 15th, and I procrastinated and
Mm.
procrastinated and procrastinated. And long story short, did not submit or record anything
Oh
by August
man.
15th, which was
Right.
so annoying. I
Yeah.
mean, I got
We've
things
all
out of the
done it though.
class, but yeah,
We've all
exactly.
done it.
Yeah. And then, yeah, finally, right before my birthday at the end of the year last year, I was like, Jenna Nicole actually is my name. I was like, you need to frickin' record this podcast, release it on your birthday, because I love birthdays. I was like, make it
Mhm.
special, tell people you're doing it, and go. Like I was
Yep.
very stern with myself
Good.
finally.
Yeah, you
Yeah.
have to be.
Mm-hmm.
And so what is for people who are just being introduced to it,
Mm-hmm.
what is Brave Enough to Be? What is your mission there, and who are
Yeah.
you talking to? Because I love it, but
Yeah. Thank you. So Brave Enough to Be, it actually came to me a couple years ago as a blog idea. And the idea was that going back to this idea of perfectionist tendencies and being a big people pleaser, which were like two things that are kind of like my Everests in life, um, I found that I had spent a lot of my life and relationships showing up as who I thought other people wanted me to be.
Mm,
And so Brave Enough to Be to me was going to be like an exploration of like, what are all the ways that I can be brave enough to be myself?
yeah,
And you know, it could be something as small as wearing my hair naturally curly. It could be something as big as leaving a relationship that I know isn't right for me, all kinds of things, right? And originally the blog was just going to be me exploring those different personal topics for myself.
gotcha.
And I started to do it and it didn't really take off. And I was still in that weird place of like not feeling totally comfortable about writing and sharing yet. And then I kept like the idea stayed with me. I bought the URL, of course. And so, so I'm like sitting
Big
on,
investment.
yep, exactly. I'm paying for this URL every day for like 2 years. And I knew as soon as I was ready to do the podcast, I knew that's what it was going to be called. And I knew that I wanted to explore that idea with other people. I
Yeah,
wanted to talk to people who had done things that were brave for them. So I didn't want to just talk to people who had necessarily like climbed Mount Everest,
mm,
although that's awesome. And I definitely
nice.
want to
Yeah,
talk to those
right,
people. But like, I want to talk to the people who were brave enough to say, no, I actually don't want to have kids.
right.
Or, you know, and actually that is a big, brave thing to say, even though it shouldn't be brave. But
It's
like,
right,
yeah, like big and small, you know,
right.
I wanted it to be such, and I still want it to be, it's very new. So I want it to be just, um, a myriad of conversations with different people. And right now I've only talked to women, and that's not totally intentional. I think I'm just really fascinated by women's stories and keep reaching out to women. But I do want it to be conversations with a lot of different people from a lot of different backgrounds who have made big and small and medium brave choices. And I want to hear from them and learn from them. I want people who listen to it to be like inspired, even if that's not their particular like flavor of brave,
Yeah,
um, to just see like, and to also understand what's hard for other people. So like I haven't talked about this yet. I'm planning to talk about it in an upcoming solo episode, but like I've talked a little bit at the beginning of this year on social media about wearing my hair curly and how it's such a big thing for me. And I think I know a lot of people are like, I don't get it. Like just wear your hair curly, or like it looks
yeah,
great.
yeah.
Just do it, you know? And
Right.
so I want to dive into both for myself on like that topic and others, but with other people, like why was that hard for you? Why does that feel like bravery? So that we can start to understand that like other people are walking around the world feeling fears that like maybe we don't feel, but are very real for them.
Yeah.
And maybe that will help them feel, help all of us feel more empathy for other people's experiences.
Jenna, I just wrote the word
Yeah.
empathy in my notebook.
Yes,
Like that's
I
all this
know.
is. It's just so much empathy. It's beautiful.
Yeah. Yeah. And just understand each other. Like it's really easy. And I know this because I do it so much, but to like assume that everybody else's experience is just like mine, that
Right.
their fears are just like mine. And to be very confused when I'm like, wait, what? Like, you know, you don't, you don't feel this way too.
Right.
So I want it to be, I want all these conversations to be an exploration of that, of other people's experiences. And you know, selfishly, I just want other people to inspire me to be brave, because you can't have these conversations with people and then like go back into your little
Right.
hole and be like, you keep being brave, I'm not going to do anything. So yeah, that's the goal.
Well, it has been wonderful. You have been reaching that goal, I think, week
Thank
after
you.
week. It's been really, I mean, I had written to you that I'd started listening to the episode with Octavia, and I was just
Yeah.
trying to finish it up today. It's for me, that's a huge episode because
Yeah.
there's so many similarities to um, my own sickness coming out of
Mm,
nowhere, knocking me out of life and stuff like that. And
yeah.
And because it's rare and they don't know where it comes from, so much of what she's talking about with the mind body sort
Mhm.
of connection, I'm like, wow, that sounds like maybe that could be part of the answer for this crazy disease I had that no one
Yeah.
can figure out,
Yeah.
But that would it's just, and your personal episode was fantastic. I love, because it's kind of like an audio version of your personal essays, which I already love. So,
I love that. Thank
yeah.
you.
So I think this is a fantastic space and project that you've taken on, just because it is going to do, and it is already doing, this building of empathy. It's
Mm.
impossible to listen to these episodes and not feel something. So I
Mm.
thank you for
Thank
putting
you.
this out into the world, because it's anything that can build more empathy needs to be out
Yeah.
there.
Oh, I know. I know. And I know you love empathy. Like whenever we're talking about Kathy Heller stuff, you're like, empathy.
Yeah.
This is what it's all about. And it's so
Yeah.
true. It's so,
Yeah.
so true. Yeah. Thank you for that reflection. I really appreciate it.
So, how can people find you? Brave Enough to Be is
Mhm.
wherever podcasts are.
Yes. So Brave Enough to
Okay.
Be is the podcast. That's the website URL. It is the Instagram handle. There's a Facebook page, and Sam Kimberly, our good friend and fearless book club leader, is really encouraging me to make a Facebook group as well. So hopefully that will be coming soon.
Oh, fun.
Yeah, so that's that. And then my website is jennabritton.com. You can find the sign up for my newsletter there. A link to the not very many Medium posts that I've published. I'm hoping after listening to you talk, your conversation with Sam that's coming up, I'll be inspired to post even more on Medium. But yeah, and then on Instagram, which is where I'm probably the most active, it's just Jenna Britton Writes,
Right.
WRITES.
Great. 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 I love it. Is there anything else that you would like to say to the Stop Writing Alone community that I have
Oh
not
my
asked?
gosh. No, I mean, hi, Stop Writing Alone community. I love you guys. I love this community. I think the only thing I want to say is just thank you, Nicole, for having me. I think I said it in my email, but I want to just really reiterate and affirm that it's such an honor to be, I feel like a little bit like a celebrity right now, to be on your podcast. So thank you so much for having me. It's been, when I talk about like creative dominoes and things that have changed my life, finding your podcast, finding your community, finding the book club, all of that has been like, I don't think that half the things I worked on last year and continuing into this year would be happening if it weren't for that. So thank you for all that you do to bring people together and to give us just so much insight and inspiration, and encouragement to stop doing this alone, whether it's, writing or podcasting, creating, living. I'm so grateful. So thank you.
Thank you.
Mm.
Trying not to get crazy emotional. Well, thank you again, Jenna. I know you're going off to work today, so I don't want to take your whole morning. I want you to ease into your day and have a wonderful, wonderful day.
Thank you, Nicole.
Well, guys, I want to thank you again for listening this week. And I can't thank Jenna enough for spending time with us and talking to us about personal essay and email newsletters and her new podcast. It's all of it. I can't recommend enough. Just check her out. I have all of her details in the show notes for you. And so you have lots to go do before we talk again next week. Also, if you've been doing the weekly writing prompts, remember that it's at NV Rivera on YouTube. Every Friday, I share a new writing prompt to do with what you wish, but many of us are taking on the challenge to write 52 stories in 52 weeks over in the Swap 52 Club on Facebook. So either I'll see you there, I'll see you in the Stop Writing Alone Facebook group or page, or at Stop Writing Alone on Instagram. Otherwise, see you again here next week. Have a great week, happy writing, and thank you as always for listening. Before you head out of here today, I want to remind you of the really special announcement that I made last week. Sam Kimberly and I are hosting the Ever After Spring Writing Retreat, a weekend in May in Deep Creek Lake, Maryland. So from Friday, May 15th to Monday, May 18th, 2020, we will be sharing a private home on Deep Creek Lake with 5 other women, exploring personal growth, transformational self-care, and sharing our own stories. We want to tap into the stories that we've been telling ourselves for years and what they have done to either hinder or help us to become the storytellers we want to be moving forward. And then we are going to work together with some fun and exciting writing exercises while steeped in all of the nature that Deep Creek Lake has to offer, which is this amazing location immersed in mountains, immersed in all the trees with a lake in front of us. I cannot wait to go. We had 5 spots available. Now there are 3. The current price, which basically expires on February 29th, is $950 for the entire weekend. That's all meals included. That's a private room of your own in this beautiful 7-bedroom home that's lakefront. We have a fire pit. We have a wraparound deck. We have a lot of spaces to gather together as a group, but also we wanted to offer that luxury of having a private room for everybody as well. So if you are interested in becoming part of this tiny, tiny community that's going to meet together on this wonderful retreat, I will have the link in the show notes. All you have to do is put your name and your email address, and I will contact you with the details so that you can further consider whether or not you want to make this commitment by the end of February. What's going to happen as soon as March rolls around is 2 things. Number 1, the price is going to go up. Number 2, Sam and I are going to start talking about this retreat everywhere. So far it looks like the seats are filling up as it is anyway, but I just wanted to give you that reminder and share the link with you one more time. If you want more details about what we are planning, please refer to episode number 56, where Sam and I go into a little bit more depth about what our plans are, what our hopes are, and how we came about coming up with this retreat in the first place. Before you go, don't forget to subscribe to the Stop Writing Alone podcast wherever you're listening to this episode today. Then connect with us on Facebook at Stop Writing Alone Facebook page or in the Stop Writing Alone with Nicole Rivera Facebook group. Check Instagram or Twitter where I'm at NV_Rivera to find links to our email newsletter.